we've had the bubble. We've had the bubble already. And I think Bitcoin and others are in and we are in a religious hall, I suppose. They're in the process of redemption and penance at the moment.
The redemption and penance curve.
Curve, that's
this
right.
This is a new Bob McDowell thing. There'll be a book.
Yes, I'm not wearing my dog collar today, but we're in penance and redemption phase. And it's a question of how can they re-establish trust, faith, and credibility? And we have wonderful people like David, who's one of the prophets. In fact, there are more prophets in cryptocurrencies than there are in the Old Testament. And David, and so David's a wonderful prophet.
The first blow has been landed already.
David's a wonderful prophet, and there are others around, and it'll be very interesting to see how long his prophet phase lasts. So, I think that then we come on to, well, how do you reestablish trust, credibility? And it was very interesting yesterday. One of my co-panelists, Iqbal Gandham, had a very interesting short piece in City AM, and there are issues, design, scalability, privacy, regulation, user incentives, and I'm also going to bring in the T word, the horrible word tax. And if I could spend a little anecdote, very briefly. I went to an ICO event at the Google campus, and people were in rah-rah mode, and then I asked a question about tax, and then suddenly I realized I was wearing a grey suit and a shirt and tie, and people thought I was from HMRC, and the atmosphere froze, and no one spoke to me during the network event. But I also, the tax issue, and there are two aspects to that. One is some issues which David has been quite eloquent about, in the sense that people must file the details of their transactions on tax purposes, and if possible, get some sort of line from the relevant tax authority. That's always difficult. But the other thing, and it came up in across the road, Chancellor Hammond yesterday, is the Prelude digital services tax. Now this goes much, much wider than cryptocurrencies, but the UK has laid down what I call the prelude or the prologue on this, and I think we're going to hear a lot more about that, and that will certainly affect cryptocurrencies.
Thank you, Bob. Talk about the master of the velvet glove, right, with a big fist inside. But bless me, David, I have sinned. So I have bought crypto, and I'm hodling. Am I a fool? Are we in a bubble?
So I actually study financial bubbles. I read books and books and books on financial bubbles and study bubbles pretty seriously. And I don't think there are any financial bubbles.
Louder?
No, not at all. There are no financial bubbles. So, and it depends what you mean, but bubbles where it's like overconfidence in people, and then it just pops. And one way to understand that, I mean, first of all, the tulip bubble that everyone uses as an example in 1526, 27 in Holland never actually happened. It's a myth. It's a myth. It kind of happened on paper, but those trades were never settled. There are several books on this, and it's fascinating, but very detailed, and the details matter. So that wasn't a bubble. Most things that we call bubbles aren't actually bubbles. If I could go back and buy tech stocks, all tech stocks in 1997, before the bubble, I would have done very well. If I could go back to the peak of the real estate bubble in 2007, the peak. If I could only buy real estate now at that price, I would do it with both hands, right? So should I hold? Well, look, if you looked at the Great Depression in 1929, it popped. If you could only have bought just before the pop, if you could just buy stocks at the peak in 1929, that would have worked out well, because that was a local maximum, and then it went down, and then it went back. So the rule on bubbles is bubbles can't pop twice. Does that make sense? If it pops twice, it probably wasn't a bubble. Now, if you look at the graph of Bitcoin price, how many times has it popped? 3 or 4 times already. We've already seen, confidence, correction, confidence, correction, confidence, correction. Now, you're telling me it has no chance to go up there? I'm not guaranteeing anything. I'm just saying it's already popped 3 times.
So,
what makes that a bubble?
wow. Okay. So the investing thesis I just heard was everything you heard about buying in the dips, nah. Buy at the peak.
We don't, there are no bubbles.
There are no bubbles.
So
And you study this, right?
It's a myth.
Bob, help me here, man.
Well, the trouble is that I'll use the word those who are not the cognoscenti, and here we have the cognoscenti, the self-certified sophisticated, I suppose. But
Why are you laughing so much?
But it's what's called the little people suffer. They get sucked in, and they put more than they should into it, and then they lose, and they go snivelling to the regulator.
So okay, let's deal with that. You look like you're bristling to
The
respect.
regulated world, the regulators are keeping the public safe. Is that it?
No, I don't think the regulators should
Banking laws?
necessarily keep the public safe. But the point is, the little people go running to the regulator and the politicians who oversee the regulator. Simple as that, David.
David, where are you on this?
Sure.
Should the regulator try to protect the consumer in their investing?
I think they've tried. I think we have good evidence that they have failed. I think they cannot produce evidence that what they do works.
Okay, so there's got to be a better way, is what you're saying.
I think regulation does not keep people safe.
So
I think we've seen that.
So caveat emptor, big red flashing lights, this is high risk, etc.
Enron was high risk.
Yes, it was.
It was.
Wait,
Yes, it was.
Apple could be high risk.
Yes.
Show me what's not high
but
risk.
you're not answering the question. Should there be some form of consumer protection or not?
I believe in education. I believe there should be. I believe that I hear people talking about picking public stocks all the time. I've just bought this fantastic stock. It's the new, it's the marijuana stock. It's the palm oil stock.
So what you're saying is compulsory education is the panacea, David?
No, it's not compulsory. If you want to throw your money into stupid investments, I don't see what's the problem with that. You can buy government lottery tickets right now. That's throwing your money away.
You're copping out, I'm afraid. You're copping out.
I believe in education. I don't think regulation works.
We all believe in education.
Actually, Bob, in fairness,
I believe that governments should take that money and do their best to educate people.
There is a big role that, for example, the FCA plays in educating the consumer.
Yes.
So they do use a chunk of that money.
Yes.
It's probably the part of their budget I think we can all agree is useful. It is the education piece of it.
More is better, It's great.
So more of
For example, the SEC put out a site on a kind of a scam travel coin site. Remember that? And said, click here to buy now. And you did that. It said the FCA warns you, don't be taken advantage of. That was fantastic.
I think we'll have to have a slight difference of view there, but we mustn't get bogged down.
Oh no, there's more to chat about.
More to talk about.
So can I ask, David? Okay. So, David, are you a hodler?
Yeah, I am. I can't tell when to sell. I can't tell when to buy.
Are you buying for your...
I bought my Ether when it was about $3, and so I just, I don't really touch it.
Okay, and you're sitting on that. Can I ask, by the way,
should I have... You can always look back and say, I should have sold here, and then I should have bought more here, and then I should have sold... You can't do that in real time. No one can. Warren Buffett can't do that.
Are you a hodler, Bob?
No, not particularly. No, I
trade or
yes,
You're a market timer?
I'm intuitive and then I rationalize.
I've heard that before.
Yeah.
I've invested in a few hedge funds that have pitched me on that one.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd like to move the topic, if I can, to something less contentious: politics.
Yes, politics. Yes.
Well, we could go religion, but I think we did that earlier. So let's do politics.
Yes,
What's the role of or impact of politics?
Well, it was
in
very
the
interesting
bubble?
hearing David's education on money and the way forward. Again, perhaps a bit like Moses at the Red Sea, he thinks it will part, and central banks and regulators will bow down to his prophecies. He doesn't understand the real politic.
I mean, this was...
That's a cheap shot, Bob.
Absolutely.
That's a cheap shot. I've written extensively about this. I talk in longer talks, and in 20 minutes, you're asking me to show the entire step-by-step way forward and break it down. I'm just trying to give people general concepts they can start conversations with.
Well, stop apologizing and perhaps give a brief explanation.
It's not hard. This is market monetarism. There are thousands of us. It's a movement. We've already built a NGDP futures market that works.
Yes.
We've seen some experiments in Singapore. All central banks are talking about going to a CBDC. They're writing papers. They're looking at sandboxing this. This is step by step.
So
and by the way, when the next recession hits,
yes,
we can thank the central banks for making it much, much worse.
Yes, you made that quite clear yesterday. So your philosophy is that your thought, your encouragement will actually erode resistance.
I'm just trying to start a few conversations. There are other people in the movement. I'm not the big one. The big one is Scott Sumner.
Why'd you call
Read Scott Sumner's blog. He's the leader.
Why do you call it a movement? Why do you define it?
It's market monetarism in the same way that Keynesians are. Austrians think of themselves as a movement.
Is it a movement or philosophy?
It's a macroeconomic school of thought, led by one guy.
Nicely sidestep, but there we are.
But actually, could you share a little bit more about the principles of consumers mining, meaning we don't need a central bank?
Really? You want to go into that on the Bitcoin versus bubble thing?
I do, because think about the relative value that becomes imbibed into decentralized assets.
Right, it's pretty cool. I think we can sort of citizen mine a lot of things that we have to spend a lot of money to protect.
Yeah.
And we're going to have proof of stake work.
Yeah.
We're going to need these hash graph and radix-like things to actually work. But if they do, man, all of your assets can live here, and we could just insurance. The whole insurance apparatus can just go away, and we can accomplish the same thing with our own phones.
I guess I would feel more confident that it wasn't a bubble if that were the case. But for that to happen, there's got to be people like Mario Draghi and all the central banks who kind of step back and say...
That's the last step. The last step is citizen mining. First, we have to get them comfortable with narrow money, with some blockchain that they can try and experiment and see if it works. There are actually a lot of academic papers on blockchain for central banks to try. So
I have to say, this is real pioneering thinking.
I'm just trying to start conversations. I mean, if I could get Scott Sumner, if anybody here can help me get Scott Sumner to come talk to the Bank of England, maybe we could crack something open and start a real conversation about it.
Wow.
Well,
I mean, it's pioneering stuff, isn't it?
It's pioneering. It certainly is pioneering stuff. It's a quasi-religious movement, I suppose.
Yeah, sticking with what we've got is rock solid.
He's got a point. Let's think about the CDOs, the CDFs, all of that kind of things. They were pioneering in their time, weren't they?
They were pioneering, and models that failed.
And look where that got us.
2008, we lost $1 trillion, and billions of people were out of work for 5 years.
But models that failed. Like the dot-com boom and the dot-com model.
But this is a failure of policy.
You may recollect.
This is a failure of government policy.
But actually, guys, I want to take you back to the question.
Like invading Iraq. I mean, government people don't make good decisions all the time.
Let me take you back to the question. We don't want to go down the too much on it, because right now, in this audience, and the people that meet us every day, the family offices, the investors, that they are saying, that they come to us because they want to know how to hold their crypto assets, right? So there are, because you know, we have a custodian business, so they want to, okay, how do I hold my, because there's no DTCC yet for crypto assets, things like that. Oh, did that cut you?
The DTCC is broken a long time ago. Actually, they have a couple good people in their blockchain lab doing smart things.
Ooh,
I'm very encouraged.
That's optimistic.
I'm very encouraged. They may eventually blow themselves up and recast themselves on our phones. We can settle our stock trades.
You heard it here first. When you see DTCC shut themselves down and restart on our phones.
They're working on it.
That is fantastic. I love that.
It's awesome.
That's terrific. I didn't know they were doing that.
I give them credit for that. In fact, some part of DTCC will be live or is live already soon for settling certain things on the blockchain.
I'm going to ask you guys this question, right?
Yes.
Do I buy some Bitcoin today to hold for my grandchildren or their grandchildren? You first, David.
I think Bitcoin, not Bitcoin Cash, sorry, Raj. I think Bitcoin will probably has a pretty good likelihood to exceed its past heights in the $20,000 to $100,000 range over the next 5 to 10 years. And I think in 20 years, it's probably zero.
Okay.
Probably gone.
Yes.
20 years, probably zero.
I think in the midterm, it's probably going to do okay, and I think in the long term, it's dead.
Yes.
That's
Well, rather like some bottles of vintage port.
Ooh, sounds more interesting.
I might want to lay down a few, as a peripheral exercise.
Like a small percentage
A
of the
small
portfolio.
percentage, a peripheral.
absolutely. Do not overcommit.
Oh my God, stop it. You cannot agree.
No,
You're
I'm
not
sorry.
supposed to agree.
I've been saying for 3 years, 10% of your investable money should be in crypto assets, fairly diversified. And if it doubles, cut it in half. You know, keep around 10%.
Well,
I've been
very
saying it
solid
from the
advice.
beginning.
Well, I'm pleased we do agree on.
I've been saying that from the
that.
beginning, and I say it again right now.
Very good.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Right, this is fantastic. But I want to leave it open for questions because what an amazing pair of gladiators to do this with. So if I could have some lights, please, and see if there are any questions in the house. This is your chance to throw them a bomb because they're not holding back.
There's a gentleman.
Where?
Here's a gentleman here.
Over here. Ah, yes. If we have a microphone ninja. If we have a
Microphone ninja.
sprinting down for you, would you, when you receive the microphone, please say who you are and then your question. And also maybe directed to an individual.
She's not as fast as she was before.
She glides.
Thank you. My name is Stephen Kingham, and for both of you, actually, it's one of the themes of today and yesterday has been regulation and the lack of regulation, and we can't regulate ourselves. Yes. Can we have your views on this market self-regulating? It is the 21st century, and why we have so many bad actors? Why can't people behave themselves in this industry?
Do you want to direct it to anyone or just both?
Let them argue over it. Each can take their own position.
Bob, go for it.
Yes, I'm not a big proponent of regulation. If people want to self-certify that they're sophisticated and they know what they're doing, and they lose money, don't come snivelling to the regulators or politicians afterwards. Is my view. But there do need to be plenty of red lights flashing, in addition to David's education process.
I think we agree on that. I think regulation, you know, if there's evidence that regulation helps people, like certain things about diving boards and swimming pools and maybe seat belts, I don't know. But I mean, you have to treat people like grown-ups. And if they make mistakes, they have to be willing to accept the consequences, and government should be actively educating people on risk.
I'm not sure that was the question. It was more self-regulation. Yeah.
Self-regulation.
Yeah.
I think self-regulation is a game we play to suck up to regulators.
I'm coming from the basis that I think, where's the cash flows? 2017, a lot of retail cash flow, mass crowdfunding. And did we really get what the net number was? Because it just kept rotating and diving in. I guess a lot of projects are trying to attract money. When we talk regulation, we flip over really. What we're really saying is we want more money coming in. We want retail money, mass affluent, we want institutional.
Yes.
Institutional won't come until we have good custody, good valuations, good regulation.
Yep.
But I'm not seeing the industry stepping up and creating standards and regulating itself. So self-regulation by the entities, by the players, by the associations.
Codes of conduct kind of thing.
Exactly. Yes. Seems to be behind the curve on that.
No, and you're absolutely right. the word standard creates so many conferences, unfortunately, but you can have at the bottom level, if you like, some form of simple self-certification. You then have an industry body, then you have an independent body that oversees. There are various scales of standard, and it would require the industry to do that, and I don't see too much evidence of that.
Would you mind saying, sorry,
quickly, I've written a book on data formats and standards and how they change society. So I think it's not so much about self-regulation as it is just about agreements between people. I think self-regulation is often the way to sort of influence regulators, but open standards, interoperability, and people coming together to agree. If we didn't have that, we wouldn't have email, we wouldn't have the World Wide Web, we wouldn't have a lot of the things we benefit from today. So I think that's really important.
Would you mind introducing yourself and also say a few words about the project that you're working on?
I'm William Abraham. One of the projects I've worked on is trying to build an institute for discussion and thought in this regard and sign up major universities and participants to really get involved in independent cutting-edge thinking on this space. But just a comment, maybe an observation that you could comment back on. I think one of the roles for regulation would seem to be to provide the edges of the table where if you go past that point, you fall off. So regulation of greed, regulation of really bad behavior, creating a playing field where people are not getting into the worst behaviors. And we've seen that in all the markets that we've had to try and create frameworks around the carbon markets, the other things that have energy markets that have to be created. There has to be a set of parameters. As much as we may not like them, as much as we want to play independently, there tends to be this edge of the table that needs to be defined, and people tend to be very bad at defining it. And if it isn't defined, then it prevents the flow of investment and capital in.
Thank you. Edge of the table discussion for regulators.
Yes, broadly I agree with you. One of the challenges in this area is that politicians and regulators haven't been bold enough to strip out the technology from the product or service which is based on blockchain. And we covered this a little bit yesterday in our panel session, is that the technology just needs a standard, if you like, but it's the product and services which, yes, do need those conduct parameters, and it requires the guts or foresight of politicians and regulators to put those in, assisted perhaps by organisations like your own that can provide very valuable input.
David?
I think it's created by very biased people who define the edge of the table. So here we have stockbrokers and mutual funds. That's okay. Stockbrokers are awesome. They're helpful. And then hedge funds, ooh, that's kind of close to off the table. And then, unregulated thing, that couldn't possibly be good. That's got to be all scams. I don't think those people have the right incentives to make the right definitions. I think it's just better to educate people and let the market find its own edges, because it's also changing all the time. And if we keep pushing things back toward the 20th century in 1940 when all these table edges got defined, I think that really just limits innovation, right? So insurance, what's great about insurance is that if you're big and you have licenses, you're really hard, to challenge, right? And the guys who are trying to challenge them aren't getting funding because they'll need another $5 million just for compliance and regulatory capital. So a lot of that is pretty broken, I think.
I want to leave time for one more question. Please say who you are.
Yes, hi. My name is Damien. I work for CoinShares. We are a cryptocurrency asset manager based in London. I have a very, very quick question for David, if I may. I think recently we've had a lot of positive signs, positive news in terms of giving access for institutional investment to go through the crypto market. We have deliverable futures coming in December. We have more and more banks working on giving products, access to institutional investors. We have more and more custody services. Obviously, the Fidelity Digital Assets, I think, was very, very big news 10 days ago. But all those news, positive news, I believe, are not very, very much reflected in the market in terms of price action as yet. I think Bitcoin is still extremely stable. What it will take, you think, short-term, medium-term, for the market to really start picking up again?
I don't predict prices. Markets are incredibly efficient. Pretty much all the information that anybody has and that a lot of people know that we don't is priced in already. So I just don't read those tea leaves and don't care. We just keep marching forward and building.
I like that. I think we're going to have to wrap it up there.
Oh.
I'm so sorry that you were enjoying it. But I would say that I truly love the spirit that you both approach this. Please put a huge hands together for a big round of applause for this fantastic duel.
Thanks very much, David. Really good sport.
Thank you.